That was stupid, not smart, my boss yelled across the open workspace. His voice crashed against the silence like a wrecking ball. What were you thinking with these quarterly projections? Did your brain take a vacation? 32 pairs of eyes shifted toward me. I felt my skin prickle with heat as Palmer jabbed his finger at the spreadsheets I'd spent 3 weekends perfecting. The same spreadsheets he'd demanded by Monday morning. These numbers would tank us within 6 months. Did you even look at the market trends, or did you just make them up? He tossed my report onto his desk, pages scattering. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he cut me off. Save it, Ivy. I need this completely redone by tomorrow. And this time, try using your brain. Someone snickered from the finance corner. Another colleague suddenly found their coffee fascinating. The air felt heavy with secondhand embarrassment and relief that they weren't today's target. This was the 6th public humiliation this month. In my 6 years at Greenstone Investments, I'd grown accustomed to Palmer's management style, build himself up by tearing others down. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was because I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. finalizing those projections. Maybe it was because I knew they were flawless. Or maybe it was because last week, during the quarterly review, Palmer had presented my investment strategy to the board as his own breakthrough idea. I stared at the scattered papers, my vision blurring slightly. 6 years of swallowed pride. 6 years of watching him climb on the backs of others. 6 years of... My phone buzzed in my pocket. I rarely received calls during work hours. Everyone knew Palmer's policy on personal distractions. Taking a call right now? Seriously? Palmer scoffed. Perfect. Exemplary professionalism, everyone. Take notes. More nervous laughter. I should have silenced it, apologized, scurried back to my desk. Instead, something compelled me to check the screen. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Miss Laurent? This is Troy from Oakley Financial. I'm calling to confirm the acquisition is complete. My fingers tightened around the phone. 6 months of careful planning, secret meetings, and sleepless nights crystallized into this moment. Everything went through? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Yes, ma'am. As of 9 this morning, the transfer is complete. You now control 51% of voting shares. Palmer stalked toward me, his face reddening. Hang up, now. I kept the phone to my ear. Thank you, Troy. That's excellent news. Who's calling you during business hours? Palmer demanded, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. I looked directly into his eyes for perhaps the first time in 6 years. Just someone confirming an acquisition. What acquisition? Confusion flitted across his face. I smiled. Mine. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Wow, I can't believe the response to this story so far. If you're enjoying it, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories like this one. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on what you think happens next. Now, let's continue. My name is Ivy Laurent, and until that morning, I was the invisible backbone of Greenstone Investments' success. I wasn't always invisible. When I started as a junior analyst, I'd been bright-eyed and vocal, eager to make my mark. That changed 3 months into my tenure when I watched Palmer present my analysis of an emerging market as his own discovery. I'd confronted him privately afterward. His response? Nobody listens to junior analysts, Ivy. I did you a favor. Your idea got implemented. Isn't that what matters? What followed was a pattern. My research, my strategies, my innovations all became Palmer initiatives or Palmer methods. Each time I created something valuable, it was stripped from me like a butterfly losing its wings to a collector. I adapted. I became quieter, more observant. I started keeping 2 sets of notes, one for my official work, one documenting the theft of my ideas. I changed how I dressed, opting for muted colors that blended into the background. I became furniture, present but unseen, heard but not listened to. What Palmer never realized was that becoming invisible gave me power. People spoke freely around me. I learned about board members' divorces, gambling problems, ethical shortcuts. I discovered which managers were cooking their departmental books, which executives were having affairs. Most importantly, I learned about Palmer. Palmer came from money, old money. He'd boast during client dinners. His grandfather had built a timber empire in the 1970s, which his father transformed into a diverse investment portfolio. Palmer had grown up with silver spoons, private schools, and the unshakable belief that success was his birthright. But 3 years ago, Palmer made a catastrophic investment against the advice of his team. He lost millions of the company's money and covered it up by falsifying reports. I discovered this by accident while organizing files for the annual audit. Instead of reporting him, I filed the knowledge away, another card in my growing hand. That wasn't the only skeleton in Palmer's closet. He'd pressured 2 female associates to leave the company after they rejected his advances. He'd borrowed from client accounts to cover personal expenses. And most recently, he'd been secretly negotiating to sell Greenstone to a notorious corporate raider known for stripping companies and laying off staff. None of this information would have mattered if not for a chance discovery 6 months ago. While cleaning out my grandmother's attic after her passing, I found a dusty box of financial papers. Among them was a stock certificate for Greenstone Financial, the predecessor to Greenstone Investments. My grandmother, a quiet secretary all her life, had been an early investor. Further digging revealed she'd never sold those shares when the company restructured. According to company bylaws, those original shares converted to founding shares, which carried 5 times the voting power of common stock. My grandmother owned 3% of Greenstone, not much on paper, but equivalent to 15% in voting power. When I inherited them, a plan began to form. For 6 months, I worked 2 jobs. By day, I was Invisible Ivy, Palmer's punching bag. By night, I was a hunter, tracking down other original shareholders, many elderly and unaware of what they still owned. I offered fair prices, better than fair, and slowly acquired shares until I was just shy of controlling interest. The final piece came from a retirement home in Phoenix. An elderly man named Chester, the former accountant for Greenstone, still held 5% of original shares. When I explained my plan, he sold them to me for $1. That man's grandfather cheated me out of my pension, he'd said. Make it right. And now, standing in the office with 32 witnesses to my humiliation, I finally had the power to do just that. We need to talk, Palmer hissed, grabbing my elbow. My office. Now. I shook free of his grip. Actually, I think we should use the main conference room. What I have to say concerns everyone. This isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, I interrupted, my voice carrying across the now silent office. In fact, I've already called an emergency board meeting for 10 o'clock. That's in. I checked my watch. 27 minutes. Palmer's face contorted between rage and panic. You can't call a board meeting. You don't have the authority. As the majority shareholder, I absolutely do. I turned to address the office. Everyone, please continue your work. There will be a company-wide announcement this afternoon. As I walked toward the conference room, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Palmer grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. What did you do? He whispered, his voice trembling with fury. I looked into his eyes, no longer feeling small. I did what you taught me to do, Palmer. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. For the first time in 6 years, I watched fear replace arrogance in his eyes. And I have to admit, it felt good. The conference room filled quickly. Board members arrived with confused expressions, some still carrying coffee cups, others checking watches with irritation. Palmer stormed in last, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. What's the meaning of this emergency meeting? Asked Lorraine, the board chair, glancing between Palmer and me. Before Palmer could speak, I placed a folder on the table. I've called this meeting to address several urgent matters concerning Greenstone's leadership and future. And who authorized you to call a board meeting? Lorraine asked, eyebrows raised. I slid a document across the table. As of 9 this morning, I hold 51% of voting shares in Greenstone Investments. According to the bylaws, that gives me the authority. Silence descended as Lorraine examined the paperwork, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. Palmer paced behind his chair, hands clenching and unclenching. This appears to be in order, Lorraine finally said, looking up with new interest. Though I'm curious how an analyst acquired controlling interest without our knowledge. That's impossible, Palmer interrupted. She's lying. There's no way she could afford. I didn't need to afford much, I said calmly. My grandmother was an original investor in Greenstone Financial. Her shares converted to founding shares during restructuring. Each carries 5 times the voting power of common stock. Palmer's face drained of color for the second time that morning. Miranda Laurent was your grandmother? That's not possible. You knew my grandmother? I asked, genuinely surprised. Palmer's eyes darted around the room. I knew of her. From company history. The slight tremor in his voice told me there was more to that story, but now wasn't the time to pursue it. Over the past 6 months, I've acquired additional founding shares from original investors, I continued. Most were happy to sell once they understood my intentions. And what exactly are your intentions? asked Dwight, the oldest board member. I opened the folder and distributed documents to each person. First, to bring to light several concerning practices that threaten Greenstone's stability and reputation. Second, to propose a restructuring that better serves our clients and employees. The room temperature seemed to drop as board members reviewed the materials. The documents detailed Palmer's covered-up investment disaster, his misappropriation of client funds, and evidence of his secret negotiations to sell Greenstone. "This is slander," Palmer sputtered, slamming his palm on the table. "She fabricated everything to stage some kind of coup." "The banking records and correspondence are authentic," I replied. "You'll find everything properly sourced on pages 3 through 17. "Why should we believe you?" Palmer challenged, regaining some composure. "You're nothing. A disgruntled employee with a vendetta." Dwight cleared his throat. "These transaction records appear to have come directly from our system. That would be difficult to fabricate. And these emails?" Lorraine looked up. Her expression hardened. "Palmer, is it true you've been negotiating with Teller Capital without board approval?" Palmer adjusted his tie. "I was merely exploring options, nothing formal. According to these messages, you've already accepted a preliminary offer," Lorraine said. "That requires board approval, which you never sought." As Palmer scrambled to explain, I watched the power dynamics shift before my eyes. Each board member's face told a story. Shock, betrayal, calculation. Some were processing the betrayal, others already considering how to position themselves in this new reality. "I propose we adjourn to review these materials thoroughly," Lorraine finally announced. "We'll reconvene at 3 o'clock. Palmer, I expect you to prepare responses to these allegations." "And what about her?" Palmer jabbed a finger in my direction. "She's manipulated this situation, acquired shares under false pretenses." "I acquired shares legally from willing sellers," I corrected. "And as the majority shareholder, I move that Palmer be placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Lorraine looked troubled. "That's an extreme step without." "Page 22, I said quietly. The board members turned to the page, which contained evidence of Palmer's harassment of female employees and subsequent cover-ups. "All in favor?" Lorraine asked, her voice tight. Every hand raised except Palmer's. As the meeting dispersed, Palmer cornered me by the door, his breath hot against my ear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started." I met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I'm finishing what you started." He laughed, a brittle sound with no humor. "You're playing a game you don't understand, Ivy. There are things you don't know, things about your precious grandmother and this company." Before I could respond, Lorraine called him away. I watched him go, unsettled by his words but determined not to show it. Back at my desk, colleagues stared openly. News had already spread. The invisible woman had suddenly become the most visible person in the building. Some approached with tentative congratulations, others with transparent attempts to establish themselves as allies. Most just watched warily, unsure where to place their bets. Hannah from accounting slid onto the chair beside my desk. Unlike the others, she had been genuinely kind to me over the years. "So it's true?" she whispered. "You own the company now?" "Controlling interest," I corrected. "And it's complicated." Hannah shook her head in amazement. "All this time, how did you keep it secret?" "People don't pay attention to what they don't value," I said simply. Palmer taught me that, though not intentionally. My computer chimed with an incoming email. It was from an address I didn't recognize, with no subject line. The message contained just 3 words. "Check your drawer." Puzzled, I opened my bottom desk drawer. Tucked beneath some folders was a yellowed envelope I'd never seen before. My name was written on it in shaky handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 years ago and a small key. "Dear Ivy, if you're reading this, then the seeds I planted long ago have finally bloomed. I've watched your career from afar, unable to interfere directly for reasons that will soon become clear. Your grandmother Miranda was more than an early investor in Greenstone. She was its heart and soul, though the company history has been carefully rewritten to erase her contribution. Palmer's grandfather stole not just her investment, but her vision. I've kept evidence of this theft in a safe deposit box at First Capital Bank for decades. The enclosed key will unlock box 217. What you do with its contents is your choice, but know that the Laurent legacy deserves restoration." An old friend who hasn't forgotten. I read the letter twice, my mind racing. Before I could process its implications, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust anyone at Greenstone. Palmer isn't the only one with secrets. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Bench, 7 p.m. Come alone. The afternoon board meeting was a tense affair. Palmer arrived with his personal attorney, a sleek woman whose reputation for aggressive litigation preceded her. He'd prepared responses to each allegation, some more convincing than others. While I may have exercised poor judgment in some instances, he conceded, these actions were taken in Greenstone's best interests. Miss Laurent's vendetta against me has distorted the facts. This isn't personal, I replied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. This is about protecting the company and its clients. The meeting ended with Palmer remaining on administrative leave while an independent audit was commissioned. Not the clean victory I'd hoped for, but a start. As the room cleared, Palmer's attorney approached me. My client is prepared to offer you a generous settlement, she said quietly. Twice the market value for your shares, plus a substantial non-disclosure agreement. I smiled. I'm not interested in selling. Everyone has a price, Miss Laurent. Perhaps, but some things cost more than money. She handed me her card. Sleep on it. Majority shareholder is a precarious position for someone with no allies. After she left, Lorraine lingered behind. Impressive maneuvering, she said, studying me with new eyes. But Palmer has deep connections and deeper pockets. The board respects your position but questions your experience. Don't assume this is over. I never do, I replied. By 6:30 that evening, I was walking along the river path to Riverside Park, the safe deposit box key heavy in my pocket. I hadn't had time to visit the bank before it closed. Whatever secrets it held would have to wait until morning. The park was nearly empty as dusk settled. I spotted the north bench, isolated, partially hidden by a weeping willow. A solitary figure sat there, shoulders hunched against the evening chill. As I approached, the figure turned. My steps faltered. Hello, Ivy, said Palmer's father, Gregory Harlow. Thank you for coming. I almost turned and left. Gregory had retired from Greenstone 3 years before I joined, but his reputation lingered. Brilliant, ruthless, the architect of Greenstone's modern incarnation. Why am I here? I asked, remaining standing. Because there's more to this story than you know. He gestured to the space beside him. Please, 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I sat, maintaining distance between us. You look like her, Gregory said softly. Miranda. Same determination in the eyes. You knew my grandmother? A sad smile crossed his weathered face. Very well once, before my father destroyed everything. He reached into his coat and withdrew an old photograph. In it, a young woman with my eyes smiled next to a handsome young man. They were standing before a storefront sign, Laurent and Harlow Financial Partners. Your grandmother and I founded Greenstone together, Gregory said. She was the visionary. I was the numbers man. We were partners in every sense of the word. What happened? Gregory's expression darkened. My father happened. He didn't approve of Miranda, her background, her gender, her ideas about ethical investing. When we needed additional capital, he offered to help on one condition. Miranda's name would be removed from the company. And you agreed? I couldn't hide my disgust. No, but while I was away on business, my father and Miranda had a private meeting. Afterward, she sold her shares to him for pennies and disappeared from my life. By the time I returned, it was done. Greenstone Financial became Harlow Investments. He handed me the photograph. My father told me she took a better offer elsewhere. It was decades before I learned the truth, that he had threatened to ruin not just her, but her entire family. Why are you telling me this now? Gregory leaned forward, his voice dropping. Because history is repeating itself. My son learned his tactics from his grandfather. When he discovered you were Miranda's granddaughter, he became obsessed with monitoring you, making sure you stayed in your place. My blood ran cold. How long has he known? Since your interview, your maiden name triggered his interest. He hired a private investigator to confirm his suspicions. All this time, the realization made me dizzy. He's been deliberately keeping you down? Yes. Palmer believed if you ever discovered your connection to Greenstone's founding, you might try to reclaim what was taken from your family. He was right, I said coldly. Gregory nodded. But there's something you still don't know. Something in that safe deposit box that could change everything. What? He stood, buttoning his coat. That's not my story to tell. But know this, Palmer isn't just afraid of losing control. He's afraid of what you'll discover about how his grandfather really built his fortune. As Gregory walked away, he paused. Be careful, Ivy. My son doesn't lose gracefully, and he has more allies than you realize. I sat alone as darkness fell, the photograph clutched in my hand, feeling the weight of a history I hadn't known was mine. My phone buzzed with an email notification From Palmer, we need to talk. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Come alone or suffer the consequences. Attached was a document. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was my grandmother's original contract with Greenstone, with a clause I hadn't known existed. I stared at my phone screen, trying to process what I was seeing. The contract contained a non-compete clause unlike any I'd seen before. It didn't just prevent my grandmother from starting a competing business. It barred any Laurent from holding a management position in financial services for 3 generations. The penalty? Forfeiture of all family assets to the Harlow Family Trust. The clause was outrageous, clearly unenforceable in modern courts. But in 1974, with different laws and a powerful adversary, my grandmother must have felt trapped. More disturbing was the signature. Shaky, rushed. Nothing like the careful penmanship I remembered from her birthday cards. I barely slept that night. By 7 a.m., I was standing outside First Capital Bank, waiting for it to open. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of nearby bakeries and the promise of rain. My meeting with Palmer was in an hour, but this couldn't wait. When the doors finally unlocked, I presented my ID and the key. The bank manager escorted me to a private room where the metal box sat waiting. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key. Inside were 3 items: a small leather journal, a microcassette tape, and a sealed envelope with, "To be opened only upon my death, Gregory Harlow," written on it. The journal was my grandmother's. The first entry was dated the day after she sold her shares. I made a deal with the devil today. Victor Harlow threatened to destroy not just me, but anyone connected to me. He had photos of Gregory with Eleanor, proof of the affair I'd suspected but couldn't confirm. He would use them to ruin Gregory's marriage unless I disappeared. The contract is monstrous, but I signed to protect both Gregory and my unborn child. Victor doesn't know I'm pregnant. No one does. I'll raise this child far from here, far from the Harlow influence. Someday, perhaps, the truth will emerge. My hands shook. My mother had always said her father died before she was born. Was it possible that Gregory? I flipped through more entries, reading my grandmother's account of how Victor Harlow had manipulated land deals, threatened competitors, and bribed officials to build his empire. She had documented everything, including the wetlands scandal that later became the Harlow estate. The tape was labeled simply, "Victor and Miranda, Final Meeting." I couldn't play it without a cassette player, but I suspected it contained the proof of coercion that invalidated the contract. The sealed envelope gave me pause. Why would Gregory leave something to be opened upon his death when he was still alive? Unless, I checked my watch. 7:45. No time to speculate. I gathered the items, returned the empty box, and hurried toward Greenstone. The office was quieter than usual when I arrived. Too quiet. Staff glanced at me nervously, then away. Palmer's assistant wasn't at her desk. Palmer sat behind his massive desk, looking remarkably composed for someone on administrative leave. His attorney stood beside him, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. "Right on time," Palmer said. "I appreciate punctuality in an adversary." "I'm not your adversary," I replied, remaining standing. "I'm just someone seeking truth." Palmer smiled thinly. "Noble, please, meet Judge Wilson and Police Commissioner Brandt. Old family friends." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Palmer had connections in places that could cause me problems. "Now," he continued, "I believe you've had time to review the contract. Enlightening, isn't it? Even if you manage to keep your shares, any attempt to take a management position violates the Laurent-Harlow agreement. Your grandmother's assets, which funded your share purchases, would revert to our family trust." "That contract was signed under duress," I said. "It's unenforceable." "Prove it?" his attorney challenged. "After 50 years? With all principals either dead or unreliable?" She glanced meaningfully at Judge Wilson. Palmer leaned forward. "Here's my offer. Resign from Greenstone completely. Sell your shares back to the company at purchase price. Sign an NDA about everything you've learned. In exchange, we don't enforce the contract penalties or pursue charges for corporate espionage." "Espionage? That's absurd." "Is it?" Palmer nodded to one of the men, who slid a folder across the desk. "You accessed confidential files without authorization. You secretly recorded conversations. You conspired with outside parties to seize control." Each accusation was twisted from truth, but crafted to sound damning. I realized Palmer wasn't just trying to regain control, he was trying to destroy me. "You have until noon," Palmer said. "After that, things become unpleasant." I left without responding, my mind racing. In the elevator, I noticed a text from an unknown number. Back entrance. Black car. Now. Against my better judgment, I followed the instructions. A sleek sedan with tinted windows waited in the loading zone. The back door opened. Gregory Harlow sat inside. Get in. We don't have much time. Once inside, he asked, Did you get the items from the safe deposit box? I nodded, clutching my bag closer. And you met with Palmer? Yes. He's threatening me with everything from contract enforcement to criminal charges. He brought a judge and police commissioner to intimidate me. Gregory's face hardened. Wilson and Brandt, Victor's old guard. Did you read the journal? Parts of it. My grandmother mentioned an affair between you and someone named Eleanor, and she was pregnant when she left. Gregory closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor was my wife. The affair was a lie fabricated by my father to manipulate Miranda. But the pregnancy. He turned to face me directly. Your mother is my daughter, Ivy. I'm your grandfather. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. My mother's father died before she was born. That's what Miranda told her. To protect her from my father, from the Harlow legacy. His eyes, my eyes, brimmed with emotion. I didn't know about the pregnancy until years later when it was too late. Miranda had remarried, changed her name. Your mother was raised believing her stepfather was her biological father. Why should I believe you? DNA doesn't lie. He handed me a lab report. I had testing done when I first located you 6 years ago. I couldn't approach you directly. The contract forbade any contact. But I could watch over you from a distance, place you at Greenstone. You got me the job? The pieces were falling into place. But then Palmer discovered who I was, and made it his mission to keep you down. Yes, Palmer has always feared losing his birthright. When he realized another Harlow heir existed, Gregory shook his head. I underestimated his cruelty. What's on the tape? I asked. Proof that my father threatened and coerced Miranda. I secretly recorded their final meeting. It invalidates the contract entirely. And the sealed envelope? Gregory smiled sadly. Insurance. I've been dying of pancreatic cancer for months, Ivy. Terminal. The envelope contains my sworn testimony about everything. The coercion, the land fraud, Palmer's financial crimes. Upon my death, it becomes public record. The implications staggered me. Palmer doesn't know you're sick? No one does, except my doctors. I've been waiting for the right moment, gathering evidence against my own son to protect my granddaughter. He squeezed my hand. I've failed you in so many ways. Let me help you now. By noon, I hadn't responded to Palmer's ultimatum. Instead, I sat in the main conference room, the contents of the safe deposit box arranged before me. The board members filed in, looking confused. Palmer entered last, his confident smile faltering when he saw Gregory already seated beside me. What is this? Palmer demanded. Dad, what are you doing here? Correcting a mistake 50 years in the making, Gregory replied. Please, everyone, take a seat. As the board settled, I stood. Yesterday, I presented evidence of current mismanagement and ethical breaches. Today, I want to address Greenstone's foundation. I played the microcassette tape on a vintage player borrowed from Gregory. The scratchy recording filled the room. Victor Harlow, sign it, Miranda. Or I release these photos to Eleanor and the press. Gregory loses his marriage, his reputation, and you lose any chance of industry support. Miranda Laurent. This clause is preposterous, barring my family for generations. Victor. Insurance against retaliation. Sign or watch everything burn. Your choice. Palmer lunged for the tape player, but Gregory caught his arm. It's over, son. The truth is finally coming out. For the next hour, I presented the complete evidence. My grandmother's journal documenting the Harlow family's decades of fraud, Gregory's testimony about Palmer's ongoing financial crimes, and records of my own systematic cataloging of Palmer's abuses over 6 years. Greenstone was built on a lie, I concluded, but it doesn't have to continue that way. As controlling shareholder, I propose a full reorganization, new leadership, new ethical guidelines, and restitution to those harmed by past practices. Lorraine, visibly shaken by the revelations, asked, What exactly are you proposing? A complete audit, transparency with regulators about past violations, renaming the company Laurent Harlow Investments, restoring my grandmother's legacy, and immediate removal of Palmer from all company positions and benefits. Palmer stood, his face contorted with rage. This is slander, a conspiracy. Dad, how could you betray your own son? I'm choosing truth over lies, Gregory said quietly. Something I should have done decades ago. The vote was unanimous. By 3 p.m., security was escorting Palmer from the building. As he passed my desk, he hissed, "You'll regret this. I still have friends in high places." I smiled calmly. "Actually, you don't." While we were meeting, federal agents were serving warrants to Judge Wilson and Commissioner Brandt based on evidence from my grandmother's journal. "Your friends are busy saving themselves." His face drained of color as he realized the full extent of my plan. This wasn't a hasty revenge scheme. It was the culmination of years of meticulous documentation, strategic alliance building, and patient waiting. "You don't understand what you've done," Palmer whispered, his voice breaking. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I corrected him. "I've reclaimed what was stolen. There's a difference." As security led him away, I returned to my desk, soon to be relocated to the executive floor. My phone buzzed with a message from Gregory. "Your grandmother would be proud." 6 months later, Laurent Harlow Investments was thriving under new leadership. The ethical legacy fund I'd created was outperforming market indices. Former employees who'd been pushed out under Palmer's regime were returning. And each morning, clients were greeted in the lobby by a new installation, a wall displaying our company history, featuring a prominent photograph of Miranda Laurent and Gregory Harlow before their original storefront. Gregory didn't live to see all these changes. He passed away 3 months after Palmer's removal, his testimony sealed and filed as he'd planned. At his memorial service, I placed a single rose on his casket, whispering, "Thank you for helping me finish what my grandmother started." Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, but restoration. Sometimes the most powerful response to humiliation isn't a shout, but a whisper that grows into an undeniable truth. And sometimes, the best way to defeat those who underestimate you is simply to wait until the perfect moment to show them exactly who you've been all along. If this story touched something in you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more powerful stories of justice and redemption to light. Have you ever witnessed someone reclaim what was rightfully theirs after years of patience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated, and the sweetest victory comes to those who wait for the perfect moment to reveal their true strength.